welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are on to our final film of the FilmQuest Film Festival. This has been a long run of episodes, but we also have one more coming up, an interview with the director of the movie we are about to talk about. But today we're talking about Tim Travers and the Time Traveler's Paradox. And joining me, we've got Rakefet Abergel, Caleb Wells, and Craig Blair. We've got a great conversation coming up. Lots of great puzzle pieces to get into for a very fun, very wacky movie. So that is coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Wherever you're listening right now, hit that subscribe button. And that way you'll find out about all these episodes as they come out. Like I said, we only have one more FilmQuest episode coming up tomorrow. But then we're going to be moving right along into the Heretic live show that we recorded at Downtown Cinemas here in Las Vegas. I got a whole bunch of other episodes in the can ready to come out. The Wild Robot, Blink Twice, Megalopolis, bunch of stuff on the way. And then we got another live show coming up on Gladiator 2 later this month. So lots of podcasts on the way. Make sure you are subscribed. You can also follow us on social media at PiecingPod. And with that said, before each of these FilmQuest episodes, I'm just putting an extra little reminder that we do get into spoilers on Piecing It Together. You kind of have to if you're going to talk about what movies might have inspired the movie that we're talking about. So, spoiler alert, and let's get into Tim Travers and the Time Traveler's Paradox. All right, we're going to talk about Tim Travers and the Time Traveler's Paradox. That title is a mouthful. I'll keep trying to say it right every time, but joining me, we've got a great panel of guests here. So first up, we've got Rakefet. So nice to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. Thanks
Tell everybody about you and what you do.
Well, my name is Rakefet Abergel. I'm an actor kind of first, but I'm also a director and a writer, producer, and I'm here with my short film Still, which played last night, and we got really good feedback, so that was nice. And I'm also a Hebrew school teacher. That's like the other thing that I do.
Hey,
so,
there you go.
Yeah. Horror movies and Hebrew school. It makes sense.
There you go. Yeah, there's a lot of Jewish folklore and horror lately. I've been seeing a bunch of movies with that. But absolutely.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk about Still some more later. Let's go over there to Caleb. Tell people about you and your film.
Sure. My name is Caleb Wells. I'm also first an actor. Of course, you got to make your own stuff. So I've written and produced a short Viking film that premiered earlier this week called Outcast Forest. Very proud of it. It's proof of concept for a feature I've written. And I'm also a Marine veteran. So I take a lot of the military experiences I had during that time and kind of bring it into my stories. And I love using genre to do that instead of directly, war movies or anything like that.
That's interesting. Well, we're going to talk about your film later too, but I made note of the action in there. So, I think that kind of pays off there.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you so
That's
much.
awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So with Tim Travers, I've been asking all my guests on these panels, obviously, these film fests are kind of tight-knit communities. Were either of you familiar with the filmmaker or the movie ahead of time at all?
I saw the short here.
Okay.
I think it was here in 2019 when I was here. Because I think it was the only year I actually showed up. So I have seen the short.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew the short, but I don't know the filmmaker personally. And I didn't even realize it was a feature until I saw it on the schedule. But yeah, super cool.
Okay.
I liked the short a lot. Yeah.
I know the lead, Sam, personally. We went to the same acting studio maybe 10 years ago in New York.
Wow.
And I was also played a supporting role on his first feature as a director recently, which is where he showed us the Tim Travers short.
Okay.
So I was very excited that I was actually going to be here to be able to see the feature as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And Samuel Dunning, the lead, Tim Travers, a huge performance to have to do that much stuff. Oh my God.
That's like an actor dream. I mean, as an actor, oh God, that would be amazing to be able to play so many characters. That's kind of one character.
Yeah.
I just kept going, oh, what a dream this would be.
I remember talking to him earlier this week. He said it was kind of a blur on set because there's so much going on and so many different things to keep track of. But you know he had a blast just being there and being engulfed on all these different angles.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine, speaking to it being a blur, I imagine like you kind of can't even really keep track of what you're shooting at any given moment because it all has to be, comped together at some point.
It's like, what do I have to do that today?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to do that because there's no way.
That's hard to anyway when you shoot out of order, which is almost always
Right.
Sure.
right. It's already confusing, and then to add that, I mean, it was confusing even to watch. I was saying that to you and being like, okay, wait, gamma, omicron, like this, so for the actor it must have been, I'm impressed with him. I'm very impressed.
And on top of that, the dialogue is like not really like, who knows the kind of science they're talking about. So on top of multiple characters, you're talking about some science that like is difficult for even probably physics people to understand.
Sure, and memorizing all of those like words and things and knowing what you're talking. I mean, that alone was super impressive.
Absolutely.
I thought.
Absolutely. I think, that confusion is going to kind of come up in a bunch of puzzle pieces along the way. I mean, I think, time travel, cloning, like any of these kinds of things, they do lend themselves to just kind of being lost. And I think this character kind of being a little bit schmucky, if we can say.
Yeah.
He's extra lost along the way. But I wanted to just kind of start with my first puzzle piece, which is actually going to be Looper, the Rian Johnson film.
Yeah. So good.
It's a great movie, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis as these future and current time versions of each other, and in order to close the loop, they have to kill the other one, and it feels like this is like, so you take that, make it a comedy first and foremost, make it a comedy, not more of like an action sci-fi, but then just take it to the 1000th degree because it just keeps looping back on itself over and over and over again. And that's a great movie and a really smart movie. I think Rian Johnson is just an incredible filmmaker. And I think this movie is also really smart just in this different way, in this very like funny, silly kind of like, isn't it fun to just dig into the science of it all kind of way. So, different movies overall, but certainly I think they kind of come from the same place of just being a little obsessed with the idea of the science of it all.
Oh, yeah.
You guys fans of that one?
For me, I mean, this is like so not the same movie, but I was thinking of like 13 going on 30.
Sure, yeah. Let's put it on the list.
Yeah, like, because seriously. It's like, it's a time travel movie, I guess, so sort of, or big, you know what I mean? And it's like this idea of like falling in love with yourself. I really liked that theme of, I want to like, maybe I shouldn't hate myself so much. And like, and like in 13 going on 30, I mean, she's like, she wants to change the way that she wasn't popular and she wasn't this and whatever. And then she realizes that none of that really matters because as an adult, none of that really matters.
Absolutely.
So,
and that speaks so much to Tim Travers here because Tim Travers is just not okay with himself, clearly.
And like people like that, that's why they, I think, end up alone and miserable, because if you don't love yourself, you can't let anybody else love you because you wouldn't believe that anybody else loves you. And, it's so I mean, not to bring up my own short, but I made a short, Boo, a few years ago. And it's also about, she hated this side of herself, this like ugly side of herself. And when she finally let it out, like, I think she realized that like, it's okay that she can be different. It's okay to be who you are.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of, I got the same vibe from that.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that one up because it's not one I would have thought of, but I mean, that's
13 going on there. Oh yeah.
That's how it goes.
Well, it's like, cause it's almost like even in Tim Travers, like the good version of him in the end, the one who had a few hours to grow or whatever, like he was like the adult. And then there was like this spoiled child you know what I mean? And so I kind of related that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Caleb, let's go to one from you.
My first puzzle piece is Rick and Morty.
Oh, nice.
So Rick Sanchez, like through and through, is like Tim Travers. Beyond all this fun sci-fi stuff that happens in Rick and Morty, like it's a grandfather who hates himself even though he's the smartest man in the world, and it's like, he's like learning to love his grandson and then ultimately like learning to love himself. And it's so difficult. It just like, and obviously there's like many multiverses and versions of himself and he interacts with them all the time. And there's this constant struggle, and it really matched up well with Tim Travers, and so I thought that was a great comparable.
I think so too. It was actually one I was thinking about as well. I think that just that combination of science that you can just really dig into, but at the same time, it's all kind of just ridiculous too. And,
Oh yeah, just like Tim Travers, like you find the science part of it and you take it as far as you can take it, or as far as people are willing to like stand.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what both of them did.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was also thinking, I'll just throw this in there as a non-movie puzzle piece here, but like, and this goes along with that, but like the I fucking love science thing, you know, like Facebook page, like it's just the idea of just this kind of breaking down science in a way that's just funny and fun and silly, and it doesn't take it too seriously. The Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of ideal of science.
He had an orgy with himself. I just love that they went there, because you know everybody's thinking that. Like if you had a bunch of yous, would you fall in love with yourself? Would you? I don't want to say the F word. I don't know.
What are the possibilities of
what could you do with that? And like, how many times have you said to yourself, "I wish there was more of me"? Like, I could be at all the festivals that are happening this weekend that I wanted to be at, but I'm at the best one, so it's okay.
Imagine all the movies we could cover on this show. Amazing. But yeah, no, it definitely opens up all kinds of things that, you know, to go back to Rick and Morty, like anything can happen in a movie like this. It's just, it could be as ridiculous as the filmmaker wants it to be, or it could, you know, it could slow down and actually get serious. But this movie has a lot of goofiness.
And it kind of did at the end. Like I really enjoyed that. And I was really happy that happened, that it came around to this theme of love and self-love, and it brought it into a really emotional place. Outside of like the sci-fi fun and killing your former self and all the great ways that they did that. Yeah. It really grounded it really well.
And him falling in love with himself, like I know some people were kind of giggling, but honestly, I bought it. Like I fully bought it. And maybe that's just Sam's great acting, but I was like, yeah, I could see that totally happening. Like they had chemistry. You know what I mean? Like obviously, you know, it was just, I don't know, it was really sweet. And I was like kind of rooting for them. I'm like, I hope they make it.
Yeah. And it tracks for the kind of people who like have that kind of intellect and like also ego. Is like, that makes a lot of sense that would happen.
Yeah.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Also, if you're a narcissist, you love yourself and maybe too much. Yeah. Although I think narcissists are also very insecure. So then there's, you know, maybe they don't love themselves when they would just want you to think that they love themselves.
Are narcissists drawn to one another? That's a question. I don't know.
I feel like probably not, because if you're so self-absorbed,
they've never encountered their exact self, so we can't ever know except in the movies.
Right. Yeah.
God forbid they ever find their exact self. But,
oh my God. Black holes everywhere.
Rakefet, let's go to your next one.
Okay. God, I really wanted to bring up Back to the Future because I love it so much.
Yes, of course.
But I'm having a hard time really kind of putting it together, because to me, I mean, Tim Travers feels more like a multiverse thing than the time travel thing. But God, I love Back to the Future. So there's got to be a way. Were you you're saying yes? So tell me.
That was absolutely one of mine.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
so it's a combo.
Doc was, you know, his science mind. He's brilliant. And even though Marty was it's his grandson, right?
No, they're not related.
They're not related. They seem like it, but
they're not.
They have such a great relationship.
It's been so long.
It's like an adopted grandfather. Right. Like he's a mentor to him, I think.
It's almost like maybe Marty could have been like a version of his younger self, which is what we do when we have a young person we're trying to mentor, and like, so I think that could have been part of it. And maybe Back to the Future was they were kind of good-hearted versions of Tim Travers.
And also in Back to the Future 2, you have multiple Martys. You have multiple everybody's. Like you have a multiple Biff, whatever, because he's going back to the same place he already was. And so he's seeing versions of himself, and he's grown so much and seen so much. So I think that's also somehow connected. It feels connected, you know? Like... Yeah. That's what I love. I think Back to the Future 2 is my favorite, because you kind of get both movies at once. You get like the future stuff, but also all the stuff that happens in the 50s. And he gets to see all the mistakes he made and how he ended up where he was.
No,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Caleb, let's go to another one from you.
My last one was actually The Fifth Element.
Ooh,
And
yes.
I didn't think of that until the very end of Tim Travers because, Fifth Element is this massive, massive world. And I actually learned that they had something like over 500 sketches of the world before he even wrote the script for Fifth Element.
Wow.
Wild. So like there's all this detail and all this cool sci-fi stuff. But in the end, it all came down to like, can he tell this person that he loves them?
Mm.
And so that tracked in the end when I saw the end of Tim Travers, and it made me feel that way. It's also like the music, it was like a little bit retro and synth, and I'm like a Fifth Element is my feel good film. So I watch it a lot.
So much fun. I haven't
so
seen
it just
in years.
Yeah,
it felt in
cool.
the same universe almost, and just that theme of love, whether it's self-love or not, like really connected for me.
Yeah. I mean, this is a movie, I have to assume, relatively low budget, but I mean, it does so much with its budget between that music, like you're talking about, the look of everything, and there's just so much to the movie. It just kind of like really piles it all in, and wow, anything can happen
Right.
when you are, at a film festival and talking about time travel. Because look who just came through the time travel door.
I just came through the paradox itself.
Oh boy, Craig Blair, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
How are you guys?
Hi.
Yeah.
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So just to kind of catch you up to speed, and we'll get into your who you are here in a minute here too. But we've been talking about Looper, 13 going on 30, Rick and Morty, I Fucking Love Science, Back to the Future, and The Fifth Element. Just to kind of give you an idea of where we're at here with this Tim Travers.
Okay.
But we're going to ask you for your puzzle pieces here in a second. But first, tell my listeners who you are and what you do.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Craig Blair. I'm a filmmaker. I've been making films for quite some time. This is this film that I have in FilmQuest called The Trunk is my directorial debut. I've been working in the business as a producer, also as a first assistant director. And I finally decided to take a swing of my own and do something that I've always wanted to do, which is tell a monster movie story.
Sure.
So that's what I'm doing here. And yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of horror comedies and, squarely in that realm. And we will talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But first, you just got out of Tim Travers. How'd you like it?
Yeah, it was really cool. It
Yeah.
was a really cool movie. Very interesting. And my mind was going nuts with how they pulled it off.
Yeah.
With
That's
all-
what we were just talking about
Yeah.
before you got here. There's just
Yeah.
a lot on the screen, a lot
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah, my first AD brain was like, I was like, how they must have shot this scene 8 different times in 8 different ways for it's Sam Dunning,
Yeah.
correct? For him to do each scene as the different characters. So testament to them for pulling it off. And in the Q&A, which I was just stuck in and didn't want to leave, but they said that they did it in 17 days, which
That's crazy.
is
That's
just
wild.
Especially
is
with all
bonkers.
those setups. Like,
yeah,
that's
very
crazy.
bonkers. But really impressive, and congrats to those guys. Just the mental capacity to do that as a filmmaker and make sense of it, story wise and continuity wise. They're script supervised. They were mentioning them, and it was just really impressive to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a lot to balance, and I think it comes together. I mean, it really does. It's a fun movie, but I kind of read down that puzzle pieces list. Let's just put you right on the spot. Do you have anything? I know you just watched the movie, but anything that this reminded you of that we didn't mention yet?
Yeah, there was actually a film that you didn't mention that I thought of. It's called Time Crimes.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And it's a Spanish film, and a similar theme where a character goes back in time, and I don't want to give it away because it's such a great film that if you're into time travel films,
Yeah.
it's definitely a must see. But I would be mad at, as a film goer, I wouldn't want to give away. But there are some similarities, and I would definitely check it out after seeing this as well, because I feel like it might have influenced Stimson a little bit. Looper's another one that I thought of. Yeah. I love time travel theme in film for, there's so many films that I love that kind of, challenge that concept and play with it. And I always think it's just fascinating to try and unravel different timelines and how that all works with time travel. Because once you do it, like everything changes.
Yes.
And like it's infinite changes, going back. And it's just really interesting. I could not imagine trying to unravel that.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in the title. Right there in the title is the paradox of the whole thing. And it's like, how do you actually pull that off? It's a really, really high wire act. But, just to go back to your fifth element that we were talking about right before Craig got here, I was thinking of, there's some great cameos in this. And the Keith David cameo, I was thinking of The Matrix as far as that, which I think kind of goes with the Fifth Element in a little way. I think those movies kind of get talked about together. But as Keith David is like this architect-like character who, is just like, what a great way to use him, because he's got such presence and the voice and everything like that. And if you're going to get him for an afternoon to shoot in your movie, like make him God. Come on, why not, So I just love
and then
that
question
scene.
him.
Yeah,
as we all do.
Yes, absolutely. You got to get the questions in there. Rakefet, do you have any others that you wanted to bring up?
God, I don't know. I think I was also thinking about, it's not a movie, but the TV show Russian Doll. I don't know if you've seen it with Natasha Lyonne, and she keeps having to relive this same day, and it's different in the sense that it's more about she's the same and the day keeps kind of changing based on what she does. But I'm fascinated by time travel. Back to the Future was the first movie I saw in a theater, so I don't know. I want to tackle one, but like you said, it's so complicated. I have tried a few times, and I'm like, I don't know how to plug these holes.
I would imagine it would be similar to any kind of genre thing. Is like you get to decide the rules of that world,
right?
Whether it's vampires or sci-fi, like
what
going back in time means for you and what's that going to be, and then you have to create that world. And I don't think I'll tackle it, but like I get it. Like it's just a huge daunting task in a world, like, because there's infinite possibilities. It's like you have infinite choices. What are you going to choose? You're not going to choose anything.
Sure.
So hard.
Right.
And not to take away from Tim Travers, because I really enjoyed the movie, but like if you're going to go that wacky comedy, it doesn't matter as much if some of the rules get bent along.
Right. If it doesn't fully get, I mean, look, even again, I'm sorry, I keep bringing it up, but even Back to the Future, which I consider one of the most perfect time travel movies ever, he comes back at the end and they never say, hey, we knew a kid like you. Right. In high school, he looked just like you. His name was Marty. That never. So, and when someone pointed that out to me, I was like, "Damn it!" It was so perfect and flawless. And then, that's true. That's like a huge. How did that not get?
I'm sure they'll answer that in the 5-season TV series reboot.
Oh my God, I'll watch all of them. I'm obsessed.
I'll get into every little detail. But Craig, do you have any others that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I just want to add on. I think what you said. Is kind of the epitome of genre is rules, because if you no matter what world you create, and that's why I get annoyed with films that are that kind of break rules, that they don't really establish them firmly enough in genre. And I think whether it's time travel or creatures or demon, you have to establish the rules of that world. Or else I feel like that you lose the audience in terms of the reality of, the fantastical world you're creating. So
what's the percentage that you need to get right for the rest to be the audience suspended belief that they'll be in? Is it 80%? Is it 90%? Because there's clearly holes, but when you're there, if it's done well enough, you fill in those, we all fill in the holes with our minds when we're watching it.
Yeah. Well, also, I didn't understand half the things they were talking about in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, so they could have been full of holes for all I know, or it could have been totally scientifically correct, but I don't know. So I was just like, I'm going to believe the mad scientist.
I don't think
on
they
screen.
know.
I
I
Maybe
honestly
not.
think that is some of the best sci-fi, which Rick and Morty might be for me, which is you know like very little about science,
Right.
but you have the best imagination to create the most ridiculous stuff. Because I think if you know too much about science, you're gonna make it too real, and it's not gonna have that wild element to it that like Rick and Morty
That makes
gives
so
to
much
us.
sense. Yeah, I agree.
Because otherwise you almost can't make believe certain things happening. They'll push a button here and something crazy explodes or whatever.
Right, because you're like, that would never happen.
Yeah, that's not real.
Black holes don't come from
Yeah.
that, and it's like, okay, nobody knows.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody knows, at least.
I mean, to the rules. I mean, that's a big problem lately with superhero movies because all the multiverse stuff, and it's like if nothing matters, if you just kind of make it up as you go, it just kind of loses any stakes and it loses the audience, quite frankly. And I think that's why they're having trouble lately.
Yeah, you lose the stakes for sure.
Because everybody can come back to life. And everybody's going to survive. And then it's even harder to put suspense in and danger for the characters.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, all I want to do is watch Game of Thrones because, you
good.
just don't know who's going to die because everybody can die.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they do die, and you watch them, and you're just...
Yeah, you're like, oh my God, are they going to die?
Game of Thrones is amazing.
Based on your movie we're going to talk about in a little bit, I can't believe you like Game of Thrones. But I want to throw a little bonus puzzle piece in at the end because it's not a movie that's out yet, but I was struck by how much this reminded me of the new Bong Joon-ho movie with Robert Pattinson, Mickey 17, that comes out in January. I mean, this actor is great, but I mean, I can't wait to see lots of Robert Pattinson's on screen, like fighting each other, killing each other. But he just keeps, basically the premise of the movie is that he's working on a space station, and whenever he dies, they clone a new one of him, but then something happens and they accidentally start making extra and they have to kill each other.
That sounds amazing.
So
that made me think of Foundation, the
I haven't
TV
seen
show.
that. I haven't seen that.
So, God, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a version of this type of cloning thing for a particular individual only. And it questions reality and all these things, and it relates to that very much so. And it's an incredible show. So highly recommend that. But I just realized that has to do with a level of cloning in that way.
Yeah. That sounds like a cool show. Absolutely. I can't wait for that Mickey 17, the new Bong Joon-ho. But
oh my God, I'll watch anything with Robert.
He's so good. He's so good.
I love him.
Let's get into some closing thoughts, Rakefet, please.
Just about the film in general.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I thought it was really fun. I will watch anything about time travel, literally anything. And I've seen some bad ones, but if it has time travel in it, I want to see it. So I thought this was really funny and fun. And like I said, I love that they went there with the orgy and falling in love with himself. And I just thought because it's what everybody's always thinking. And I think that's great. I love that they just went for it. And it was impressive on all levels. From the script supervisor to the actors to the ADs to the director, as a filmmaker, super impressed.
They really go for it. Absolutely. How about you, Caleb?
I just another thing that I liked about was how the comedy connected with everything, especially seeing Stimson on screen a lot.
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh, he's gonna do a little cameo. That's fine. No, he's one of the hitmen, and it tracked so well, and the comedy between him and Sam was fantastic. That it was kind of like a perfect comedy action feel for me.
Yeah.
Came to it.
Right on. How about you, Craig?
Yeah, I excuse me. I thought it was really entertaining and fun. I thought the VFX, it was overwhelming how much VFX played a part of this and how much they mentioned too that the VFX artist was on site. And I was like, she must have been. I think it's just really impressive overall. I think that's what I take away from it the most as a filmmaker. Just such an ambitious film in terms of I think plot and performance. Really give it to Sam. It was pretty incredible that he was able to
Yeah.
pull off scenes with himself and fall in love with himself and
And have chemistry with himself somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know, like
It really
with a stand-in,
worked.
like it was beautiful.
It really worked. They mentioned the gentleman that was working as his double and was like a huge part of the process in achieving what they did. So hats off to them. I was really impressed with them pulling that off.
Absolutely. I would just accent how funny this movie can be. I think Joel McHale is great, and his little cameo as this kind of, asshole kind of talk show radio guy. And then of course Danny Trejo shows up, and that's always fun to see. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really funny lines between all of the Tim Traverses and also the love interest, and there's a lot of really funny stuff that's happening in this movie. So I would just add that as my final closing thought here. And I think that's a good place to wrap up Tim Travers. And let's talk about you guys' films. Let's start off with yours, your film Still.
Yes, so different than what we're talking about. My film Still is about a woman who's grieving a pregnancy loss, and she's kind of stuck in this nightmare that she can't get out of. She just keeps kind of reliving it and not understanding what's wrong and what's happening. And I wrote it and directed it and produced it and starred in it because I had a miscarriage 3 years ago, and it was, a horrifying experience. And I had never been pregnant before. I was 42 at the time, I'm 45 now. And it just felt like my last chance. It was an accident. But it was a happy accident for me, and I really wanted it. And I kind of imagined this whole life I was going to have with the baby and with this child. And then, of course, when I lost it, everything went along with it that was going to happen. That didn't happen. So the film is not my story. Like, it's not what happened to me. But it's all the stuff that it brought up for me. And after it happened, there was a lot of people that were trying very hard to make me feel better, and they just didn't know what to say. And some of them were saying really hurtful things and not realizing that they were really hurtful things that were just not helping. Right. And I think that goes for any kind of grief, if you lose a parent or a sister, or whatever, God forbid. So I was like, if I had an actual baby and I lost it, like it just disappeared into the ether, would people be like, oh, it's okay, it was young, you can try again, you can get another baby? And it's like, no, you would never say that to somebody with a live child, right? So obviously I was pregnant, it wasn't alive, it wasn't a child, but in my head it already had grown up, it was already going to school, it was already like I was moving houses so that I had an extra room, like I had imagined this whole future. And so for them to be like, it's okay, you can try again. It's like, well, first of all, you don't know that I can try again. You have no idea what my situation is. You have no idea if that can happen. And so I wanted to make a movie that not only explained to people like, hey, these words are not helpful, even though you mean well, but also for people who had not experienced something like that to be able to say, hey, you don't know what it feels like. This is what it feels like. Watch this. And I wanted to make a visual representation of the pain and the like sadness and the depression that it causes. And I don't think it's a woman's thing, because it affects men all the time as well. And I think, if anything, I think men need to see it even more, because I think they're even more afraid to say like, oh, this is sad to me, or like my wife lost a pregnancy, or we had a stillbirth or whatever. And they feel like, well, it didn't happen to me, so I shouldn't be the one who's depressed. And it's like, no, you also imagine this whole life that you were going to have, and maybe it didn't physically affect you, but obviously I'm sure it psychologically affects them. Yeah.
It's obviously such a personal story, but at the same time, that idea of anybody being through some kind of trauma or some kind of horrible thing, and then people with their well-meaning comments, that's something we've all been through.
I've had, yesterday, one woman came up to me and she's like, I lost my dad. And I felt, it was the same thing. People were saying kind of similar things to me. And, it's like, all you have to say is, I'm sorry. Can I do anything? I'm here for you. this is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, this is horrible. I'm so sorry. Like, that's it. You can't fix it. You can't bring someone's dad back. You can't bring someone's pregnancy back. You just need someone to be there.
Yeah.
And I made it into a horror movie.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Because it was honestly a horrifying experience.
Yeah.
And I had never been pregnant before, and that alone was a horrifying experience. I think if I had gone through the whole pregnancy, I would have made a horror movie about that, because it was just scary to think that there's something growing in you, and you could feel something, and I don't.
Some of the best horror movies are about that.
But it's like creepy, because it's like a little alien is like growing, and just this feeling of like, I can't eat this because it's gonna. It was really weird. Like at the gym, you can't twist. There was like all these rules, and I was very early in my pregnancy, but like still there were so many rules. And so and then I won't get into details because that doesn't really help anybody, but it was, things happen that they don't show in any movies. And I didn't actually go there in mine either, but it's just, I feel like it's misrepresented. It's like, oh, there's a little blood on the sheet, and then they go to the hospital and they're sad. And it's like, no, I was in labor for like hours. Like I had contractions. It was horrifying. It was a horrifying experience. And it was during COVID, so they wouldn't let my mom in the room. It was like a whole thing. So to me, it was like a nightmare. It felt like I was in a nightmare. Yeah. And I felt like I couldn't get out of this nightmare. And like I said in the Q&A, I had a really bizarre, we buried it, and the next morning I woke up and I was like, I just want to dig it up because I just want it to be with me again. And to me, that was like horror personified, because I was like, why would I want to dig up this thing that's not even the thing, and hold it, And so I was like, I have to make a horror movie. Like it just felt like it lended it to that. Yeah. So well, I didn't want to make like a sappy Hallmark version of it. I wanted to make something that was like, no, this is how horrible it is.
Well, on the filmmaking side of things, I wanted to ask you, because of that mix of, the horror of the drama of it, but then the horror of it being a genre movie at the same time, for your collaborators, how was it trying to like get across the mixture of that and like what you wanted out of the project?
You mean like for like the editor and the composer?
Everybody that,
I think I talked to everyone individually about it, and I think they all got it. It didn't seem difficult for anybody to grasp.
That's good.
And some of them had experiences with their wife or their sister or somebody, or themselves. And I had a big team meeting on set the day of, and I just like thanked everybody for being there at way below what they usually get paid, and like just telling them how important it was to me. And it was actually a very happy, well-run set. Like it wasn't, the movie's so depressing, but we actually like had a great time. Like we had so much fun. I mean, I had maybe less fun than everyone else because I was in a place. Yeah. But I was crying and directing, and it was, I don't know if I would ever do that exactly again, but it was cool. And we had Andrew Dawson as our sound mixer. He won an Emmy for American Horror Story. Nice. And the only reason we got him was because the strike was happening, and he's like, I don't have a job. And someone introduced me to him, and he's like, I'll do it. I'll just do it. Nice. And he made it sound so creepy and wonderful. And our composer, Catherine Capozzi, was amazing. Yeah, she did like a fantastic job. Yeah. And it's not at all like the script. The script was apparently plotless. We realized when we put it all together on screen, I was like, nothing happens. It's just like very sad. And so we actually went out and shot a bunch of other stuff like a month and a half later. And then me and my editor sat for hours and hours and hours and hours reconstructing the story from what we had. So like the opening scene is actually the last scene in the movie. And like the middle scene happens at a different part. Like everything got completely puzzle pieced to a different place. We added all these voicemails that my actual mom was the mom on. And with that and the sound, it came together. So I'm glad, because it was a very boring, sad movie. The first cut, I was like, we need something to happen. Like there needs to be some kind of something. And I wrote a song for it too, which I've never done before in my life. Yeah. But we needed a song, and I was like, who better to write the song than me? So I wrote the song, and I got a musician, Sarah Smith, to do it, and we made a music video, and
that's great.
We did the whole thing. We did the whole thing.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I got to ask before we move on, but any movies that were like big influences on this project? I mean, it's a very personal thing, obviously, but
Yeah, I mean, no, I feel like I hadn't seen anything like this, so I
Right,
kind of
yeah.
wanted to make something like that. We did have this Spike, I call it the Spike Lee shot because it's the shot that Spike Lee always uses, like somebody, it's like you're moving with the camera like through space.
Mm.
And my cinematographer didn't want to do it, and I was like, "Oh, we're doing it." And she's like, "Come on!" And I was like, "No, we're doing the Spike Lee shot. We're doing, And we got to use different cameras and stuff, which was really cool. We tried to do some POV stuff with a helmet cam, but it was so heavy and it hurt so badly that we only got one shot out of it, and I couldn't do it. But I tried to be, I don't know, like I wanted to make it something. I wanted to visually represent the feelings in some way. And so it's definitely my most experimental of any film, I guess.
All right. Well, let's go on to Caleb's film.
My film is called Outcast Forest. It is a Viking short film. It's about a lost Viking who discovers a Saxon girl on the run from some thugs and has to intervene to find his way home. That was inspired by some experiences I had being deployed with the Marines in Iraq, interacting with a lot of Iraqi police chiefs and tribal leaders and a lot of the citizens, and realizing that we're all the same. It was just kind of like a really stark representation of that, because we can travel, but we're not often in places that are war torn or in the middle of a war. Mm-hmm. And that was a big realization that came out of that for me, that went into this story about found family and acceptance and seeing people who are different from us.
Yeah.
But the story came out of Scandinavian folklore that I researched, of a character called a Hulder, which is like a forest spirit that lives in the woods. It's a female character. She can suck men's souls. And there's a saying like, don't throw a rock in the woods because you might hit a Hulder, because they can turn themselves invisible.
Okay.
So I went with that and kind of grew the story out of it because since becoming an actor, I've always wanted to do Viking stuff, and Lord of the Rings has been a big inspiration, and of course Game of Thrones and all the big stuff that you already know. And I realized I had to make it myself. So I wrote the story. I collaborated with Frank Raudsep, who is a classmate at New York Film Academy years ago.
That's the director, right?
He's the director.
Yeah.
Originally from Estonia. Mm-hmm. So we made the language of the Viking in the story Estonian. Myself and Valerie Lessard, who plays the forest spirit, learned our lines in Estonian for it, so that we could have a dual language film. Nice. And it could be more realistic. And I'm just super proud of it. There's a lot more details of what went in to make it, but it's a proof of concept for a feature that I've written, and we're getting ready to start pitching. My director's has moved back to Estonia because he's originally from there, and kind of laying the groundwork for trying to get it made in the future.
Right on, right on. Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, with your military background, I had mentioned this before, but the action sequences, for a proof of concept film like this, it's not like the full feature. I mean, it already is looking like you've got the action beats really going strong there. So talk a little bit about some of like the choreography of that, and like trying to make that like actually feel real and visceral.
Yeah, it was so fun to make. But I was a Marine infantry officer, so I had enough combat fight experience from training that allowed me to kind of visualize exactly what I wanted. So when I write action, I write as much detail as I can. So when we took that to a fight choreographer, Jared Kirby, who's out of New York, and also like a union guy who it was like close to the strike, and he gave us a nice discount and worked with us, because when you go to somebody who does fights and you're like, hey, I want to make a Viking film, like, oh hell yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
And Jared was incredible. He's published on Shakespeare Stage Combat and a bunch of stuff, so he really knows his stuff. but he took us the extra percentage that we needed to make everything on screen work. Like to think about characters, who the characters are, and how they individually will fight, um, and arrive at a fight, as well as when you're doing a fight scene with more than like just two characters, because we had three thugs and me fighting, and then the girl is also a little bit. She didn't do much fighting, but she was a part of it. So while the punches are happening, what are the other characters doing? And instead of just waiting around to get punched next,
Right.
and he knew exactly how to help mold it so that it worked well, that it looked realistic. Like everybody's going to try and fight at the same time, but like because of space and what's happening, and it just, for me, it's the crown jewel of the film.
Nice.
And I love it so much. And I also want to talk about the score with the fight. Jonas Tarm, who is a really well-known Estonian composer, lives in New York. Frank, the director, knew him and asked him to come on. So it was all original composition. He found an Estonian stringed instrument from Viking times, bought it, learned it, and played it for the score, as well as a bunch of other instruments. And especially during the fight scene, used his voice to kind of start it off.
Nice.
So the fight starts with me kind of rushing them, and he uses his voice, which he actually injured in trying to go so low. He injured his vocal cords.
Throat singing, yeah.
But he pulled it off so well, and which is why that part of the film I just love so much.
Oh, that's great. That is great.
I gotta see it.
Yeah.
So I as far as like, influence, I mean, you mentioned, your you mentioned your Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, but I had thought of God of War, and then you showed up to the Halloween red carpet as Kratos.
Oh yeah.
So was that something on your mind with this movie at all, or is it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I didn't have the console. I played video games my whole life, but I haven't had a console in forever. But I played it a couple times, and so I think probably the 2018 publishing of God of War, and how he's a father and he's his son. Like, of course, I think that factored into my mind when I was developing the story. But 13th Warrior was a huge inspiration for me. It's one of my
That's one of my
favorites of all time, and I rewatched that a lot. The Revenant as well, because we wanted it to look like HBO. And so we wanted it to be as gritty as we could make it with the budget we had and the resources we had. So The Revenant was a big inspiration for that as well, including the score.
Yeah.
And especially when the first time you see me in the film, I'm waking up on a beach because I was shipwrecked. And if you think about it, and if you go listen to the Revenant score, it's a very similar feeling in that moment, but it like worked so well for us, and Jonas created something really cool that we could use that was original.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then of course Vikings TV show that from the History Channel.
I love that show.
Yeah,
I think is one of everyone's top Viking things that of course as well inspired it.
Absolutely. Well, let's go over to Craig for your film, The Trunk. Tell us a little bit about that.
The Trunk is really, when it comes down to it, is my homage to the films that I grew up loving, that are of the similar genre, that mix the horror themes with comedy, and there's the films that really like. There's a lot that kind of inspired me to get into this line of work, but the Evil Dead series and Army of Darkness kind of mix. Also, Army of Darkness mix two of my favorite things, which is, mixes three things: the comedy, demons and fantasy like that, but also, knights and swords and swordplay, which we're gonna have to have a conversation.
Well, also just to add to that real quick, and over the top filmmaking, because Sam Raimi, it just doesn't get better,
Yeah, and a huge fan of his and Creepshow. Those are the kinds of films that really inspired this. And when I came around to this, I was working on developing a feature film that is in current time. The Trunk takes place in the 70s, and is a very much a grindhouse vibe and grindhouse style.
Yeah.
The feature that kind of we were developing is a little different. It's more of a modern story, actually a doppelganger story, but also has a very big creature element in it as well. But we wanted to kind of shine the lead actor Lamorne Morris in that role, and in a dual role with another character, dual comedy with the creature elements. So we kind of my DP also helped co-wrote the story with me, and he and I just kind of developed this concept. We really wanted a beautiful desert landscape and a really cool 70s car.
Yeah.
And it kind of inspired that, and just all the demon lore that I loved so much growing up.
Yeah.
So that really inspired the film itself, and it kind of just added on. Like, so many lucky to have so many talented friends that are in the industry, and also at the time weren't as busy as usual, so could draw from them as well. And it was just such an incredible collaboration. So John Orphan, my DP and co-story writer, Dane Hallett, who's an incredible concept artist and creature designer. He works in the Alien franchise and the Mad Max franchise as well. He actually developed the creature at Odd Studio, which is a incredible special effects studio, makeup studio in Sydney, Australia. He developed the creature there. We would develop it back and forth with concepts, and then he fabricated it there, and then brought it on the plane over to do the shoot.
Nice.
So yeah, just incredible. And my wife Fiona Hardingham, who produced the film with me, she's over there. Yeah, she did an incredible job, and everyone just kind of contributed to the creativity of making this kind of this grindhouse 70s film. Gritty kind of 70s film, and Lamorne Morris stars with Kyle Chevron. And I think, at the core of it, it's really a story about two friends.
Sure.
And, if you guys have a best friend from like childhood, or a long standing best friend, like when stuff gets, goes haywire, you always you infight and you argue, but like at the end of the day, you stick by them.
Yeah.
And that's really what it tests, that bond between them. Janine is Mitchell's ex-girlfriend, and we don't really know what's going on when when they're first driving into the desert. We just hear, knocks on the coming from the trunk, and then we hear a girl, and then we hear a crazy creature voice.
Yeah.
So
I think the information is doled out at a very good pace.
Thanks. It was something that I really wanted to do. Was kind of, one of the things I love about storytelling and film is when films don't reveal things, they kind of let them evolve and organically come out as the story goes, and you feel more engaged, kind of taking in the story, and you're more engaged with the characters, because the characters are you're learning it while they're learning it. You're not just getting oh, well, this is what this is about, and this is where it's going, and okay, let's see how we get there.
Yeah.
I find it more interesting to kind of discover things as we go and not know, and then kind of see it pieced together and be like, oh, that's why that was happening. Oh, that was
sure.
Yeah. So I love those little breadcrumbs, and that was something I really wanted to do in this, and yeah, it's just one of those things where you get it's like a brother relationship or a sister or sibling. You get so angry with them because of their little idiosyncrasies, because you know them so well, and they're always gonna have these tendencies that they're coming.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen, but and they frustrate the hell out of you. But like, when everything falls apart, they're there for you.
Well, and that's why, I mean, obviously Evil Dead is like the number one thing I think anybody would think watching this movie. But then I went to Shaun of the Dead as my next thing because, I mean, that relationship is above anything else in Shaun of the Dead. It's about that friendship between the two of them. And
You nailed it. Yeah. That's
so.
other, that's in the pitch deck. That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. And I feel like that's one of the most endearing things about Shaun of the Dead.
Exactly.
Is that friendship. And like, the comedy that you get from that as well is just, it's, you watch two siblings fight and argue, and it's usually pretty comical because they know the buttons so well.
Sure.
And they attack those buttons. So I think that's a lot of the comedy comes from that, and I that's what I really enjoyed and what I was going for. So I'm so happy you made that association because that was
right on.
So and then like mix that in with Creepshow is a bunch of vignettes, Stephen King, and there's the Crate, which I always was terrified by. That really inspired this too. It was like to have something that was lying in wait that you don't really know what it is, and then the big reveal.
I haven't seen Creepshow since I was like 6, and it scared me for like 10 straight years.
I mean it's so good. I mean there's a lot of really good. It's basically a string of short films strung together by a comic book narrative. So
I gotta watch it again.
It's so good. I mean, Stephen King even acts in it as well. In one vignette. So I always loved and gravitate towards that stuff, and Tales from the Crypt. As well. So that was kind of what I was trying to do, and I also a little bit of you as a filmmaker for many years, directing something or a narrative for the first time, I really wanted to kind of go with something I felt like I have a right to talk about or to story to tell, and that's in that world where I felt like was somewhere where I had more confidence. So it was a little bit of that as well.
That's great.
Trying to do something that I felt like I'm confident about, that I could tell well.
It comes from a place of love of those kinds of movies.
Exactly.
So absolutely. Well, guys, this has been great. Tell everybody where they can find you and your work.
Sure. You can find me at cyclamenfilms.com. Also at Cyclamen Films on Instagram and on Facebook, and Rakefet Abergel on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me. I'm very findable.
All the links will be in the show notes as well.
I'm everywhere.
Caleb, how about you?
Best place to find me is on Instagram at Huggy Viking, which kind of is an old nickname that's come through and stuck very well, and for good reason. And so it's just basically my Instagram, my director's Instagram, Frank Routset.
Cool. How about you, Craig?
Same thing on the gram, it's Craig Blair Film, and also the website is craigblairfilm.com. That's the best way, I guess, to follow the work. And a bunch of stuff coming up. So looking forward to putting more stuff out into the world.
Right on. Well, guys, thank you so much for doing the show.
You.
Hopefully we'll get you all back again sometime.
Hope so.
Thanks, David.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Tim Travers and the Time Traveler's Paradox. Thank you so much to Rakefet Abergel, Craig Blair, and Caleb Wells for joining me on that one. And thank you to you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure you are subscribed. We've got the follow-up interview with the film's writer-director, Stimson Snead, coming up tomorrow, and you don't want to miss that. We also have a lot more podcasts on the way, so you don't want to miss any of that either. So make sure you are subscribed. You can also follow me on social media at PiecingPod. Join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. And don't forget, we do have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there. If you are enjoying the show, just keep on listening. But if you want to support the show, you could also go sign up on the Patreon. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. And speaking of my music, I always close these out with a piece of my music. And I think I got to go with something spacey for today, don't I? I'm going to go with a track from my recent 24 for 2024 project, where I've been releasing a new single on the first and third Friday of every month of 2024. And I'm going to go with a track called Back Into the Void, which is a very spacey song. So I think it'll fit pretty well here. So this is Back Into the Void. You can find it. Search for David Rosen on any of your favorite streaming music services. And we'll be back with one more FilmQuest episode tomorrow.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.